Okay, in this video, we are going to use what we know about place value to solve some decimal multiplication problems. You should have already watched the two Khan Academy videos, which explain how this works and why we're allowed to multiply without the decimals and then put them back in after we multiply. If you're confused about what I'm doing, or if you don't know why I'm allowed to do this mathematically, I want you to pause this video and re-watch the Khan Academy video called Multiplying Decimals Place Value. Pay close attention to the very last minute too, especially. Okay, so we're going to start with multiplying tenths, and then we'll move gradually into more challenging problems. I'm going to start with multiplying 1/10 times 5/10. Now, when we multiply, just like we learned in those videos, we know that we can multiply decimals by just stacking them and multiplying through. But what we also learned is that if we want to use whole numbers to multiply these, we can, and then we can add the decimals in to the correct place value at the end. So what I'm going to do is rewrite this problem as 1 times 5, and we can solve it like this. Now, I'm going to stack them like this and solve it using this form of multiplication. For numbers like 1 times 5, it's easy to do that in our head. We don't necessarily need to, but I'm going to keep using this form because it'll make more sense towards the end when we get bigger multiplication problems. Now, 1 times 5 we know is 5, but we also know that 1/10 times 5/10 does not equal 5. So what we need to remember is to look back at how many decimal points we have in our original problem. Now, you want to see how many place values there are to the right of the decimal. And we know that we have one place value here to the right of the decimal and another one right here to the right of the decimal. So that makes 2 altogether. And so what I want to do is start all the way to the right of my 5 and move that decimal point over 2 place values. So if my decimal point is here, I have to add in that 0 right there, and my answer becomes 0.05, which we read as 5/100ths because this is the hundredths place value. So to do another example of multiplying tenths together, I'm going to multiply 2/10 times 8/10. Now, I'm going to skip this step that I have right here. We know we can stack them and then take out the decimal points. So I'm going to go ahead and start just by taking out the decimal points. And we have 2 times 8. What I'm going to do is multiply 2 times 8 and I get 16. Easy enough to do, but then I have to make sure I go back and count how many place values we have to the right of the decimal. Here's 1 and here's 2. So I'm going to start where the decimal point would be, and I'm going to move it 2 place values over. There is the decimal point, and we get 0.16, which we read as 16/100ths. Okay, one more problem using the tenths, and then I'm going to add in a more complicated problem. So we are going to multiply together 8/10 times 9/10. Just like we've done before, we turn it into a normal multiplication problem by taking out those decimals. It's like we move the decimal point over one spot for each number. And we get 8 times 9. Now 8 times 9 is 72, but I'm not done yet because I need to count how many place values are to the right of the decimals in our problems. There's 1, there is 2. So I'm going to start where the decimal point is, and I'll move it over 2 spots. My answer is 72/100ths. Okay, so you should have a pretty good idea of how to multiply tenths together and adding back in the decimal at the end. We are going to do the same process, but multiply a tenth by a whole number. So if I want to multiply together 8/10 times 7, what I'm going to do is I need to take out just this one decimal point, and so I'm going to be multiplying 8 times 7. When I multiply 8 times 7, I get 56 because 8 times 7 is 56, and then I need to go back up. Now, I didn't have any place values to the right of the decimal here because there's no decimal in the number 7. But if I look at this, I have one place value to the left, to the right of the decimal. So all I need to do is move the decimal point over one spot to the left, and my answer is 5.6 or 5/6. So again, all you have to do is do a regular multiplication problem, making sure that you know how many spots you need to move that decimal point over based on how many place values are to the right of the decimal in your problem. Let's do another one multiplying a whole number by, except this time we're going to use hundredths. I'm going to multiply 5 times 25 hundredths. Now, here I'm going to set up the multiplication problem again. And I'm going to put the 25 hundredths on top, but I'm going to change it to just 25. I'm taking out that decimal point. So 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 2 is 10, plus that 2 is 12. I have 125 as my answer. And then what I need to do is go back up and count how many spots are to the right of the decimal point. Now, there's none in the number 5, but be careful here for 25. Here is 1 to the right of that decimal point, and here is another 1. So that makes 2 altogether. So when I have my answer, I start with the decimal point where it is, and I move it over 2 spots to the left. So 5 times 25 hundredths gives you 1 whole and 25 hundredths. Now, if you want to think through this problem in another way, you can think of that 0.25, 25 hundredths, as 25 cents or a quarter. And we know that 5 times 25 cents or 5 quarters is going to give you $1.25. So you can think through that and make sure it makes logical sense to you. Let's do another problem